Welcome to another episode of Full Spectrum Frontiers, the podcast where we dive deep into the intersection of manufacturing, military, economy, politics, American culture, and life. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we're thrilled to have a very special guest with us. Joining us is Eddie Lazzari, a seasoned military veteran, entrepreneur, intrapreneur, and podcaster, known for his deep insights and compelling storytelling. Eddie has a wealth of experience and knowledge from his time in the service to his ventures in the civilian world. He's here to share his unique perspective on procurement, supply chain, and the current state of American manufacturing and their vital role in our economy and society. Get ready for an engaging and enlightening conversation as we explore the full spectrum of these frontiers with Eddie Lazzari. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's episode. Give it just a little blurb on who you are.
Yeah, my name is Eddie Lazzari. I am the procurement manager for Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast. A lot of people don't know how Coca-Cola is structured. We're made up of a conglomerate of independent bottlers across the United States and Canada. And I am one of the bottlers that manages the procurement for the organization. And when I mean procurement, it's direct, indirect, and I'm also responsible for vendor master data. A lot of people get very confused about the differences between supply chain, logistics, procurement, purchasing. A lot of that is very related and has some overlap, but there's also some very specific differences with all of those. So I'm involved with, the nice thing about procurement is I'm involved with virtually every facet, aspect, department, function within the organization. It touches me somehow, whether it be setting up vendors, changing vendor master data, assisting with reviewing contracts, contract negotiation, supplier diversity, procurement, both in direct and indirect. So direct being your raw materials, and indirect being everything that supports the organization. So I deal with all the production and sales centers, operations, interface with fleet, human resources, transportation, marketing, sales. The list goes on and on and on. So it's very diverse. It's a very engaging role. We also, we are a function within the organization where our customers are essentially our internal departments. That's who we serve, and of course, then we also manage the supplier relations. So we have over 4,000 active vendors that we currently do business with in our system. So definitely keeps us busy, keeps us very engaged.
And that's across the world, right? Like 4,000 around the world.
No, so we most of our suppliers are domestic within the United States.
Cool.
Yeah, we have a handful that we do business with that are international, but for the most part, all of our business is within the four walls of the United States.
So was it always that way, though?
Yeah, and I think it's the nature of the product that we produce and the raw materials that we source. That's, for the most part, it's all done very locally. As a matter of fact, most of our supply base is very local to our region, our geographical area. So our direct procurement, which is the raw materials that we purchase in order to produce the product, that may come from, outside of our territory, specific plants, around the United States. But for the most part, the indirect side of the business is very local. So indirect being anything that's supporting the business outside of the actual manufacturing of our goods. So, for example, at our sales centers, and some examples of indirect procurement would be, anything that you would need to sustain your facility. So lawn care and maintenance, snowplow removal, janitorial services, pest control, roof inspections, paper product for like office supply type stuff. The MRO category, maintenance overhaul. That's your individual piece parts for your fleet shops, like your fasteners, your nuts, bolts, washers, consumables, adhesives, oils, those types of things. Those are all considered indirect goods and services that support our business. And then direct would be like, the labels, the PET, the packaging, and all of the stuff, the concentrate, all the things that we would need to actually produce our beverages.
Gotcha. So, obviously, one of the things I've brought you on to talk about is supply supply chain disruptions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, obviously, we had, and I'll say the pandemic era, right?
Right. Yeah.
Supply chain disruptions created massive shortages in goods and services, even because of lockdowns and whatnot. And now as we were talking earlier, and we've known each other for quite a while, so I talked to you during that whole just nonsense, and your inability to get certain things, right?
Yeah.
So that was, say, 2020, right? March, April 2020 is when that really started hitting. So we're just over 4 years after that. So what are your issues still with the supply chain disruptions that you're still feeling from 4 years ago even?
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind is the supply chain, especially if you're talking global supply chain, it's a very fickle beast, right? And there's this phenomenon called the bullwhip effect. So things that happened 4 years ago, in some cases, we may just now be feeling the effects of. It takes that much time to ripple. It's like a tsunami, right? So an earthquake happens in Japan, and it generates that wave underneath the ocean.
Yeah, it's the ripples in water, or
Right.
what's the other term? The butterfly effect, like
Exactly.
yeah.
It takes time to travel across the sea, but when it finally makes land, it's devastating, right? And so a lot of people think that, yeah, the pandemic was 4 years ago. Everyone just needs to get over it. But at the end of the day, some organizations and some supply chain functions are just now starting to really feel the impact of it. And that's kind of where we are today, and in each industry is going to vary, but the beverage industry, which is what I work, has undergone a significant transformation in recent years, driven by the evolving consumer preferences, technological advancements, and the broader market trends. And a lot of that is driven by the pandemic that we had 4 years ago. So some of those shifts are towards health and wellness. There's been health conscious choices. Consumers are increasingly opting for healthier beverage and options, such as low sugar, low calorie, and functional beverages that offer added health benefits like vitamins, minerals, probiotics. So a lot of the demand from our customers are driving innovation that we see within the beverage industry. There's also a lot of demand for natural and organic ingredients. The other big thing that we're seeing is sustainability and environmental responsibility. This is something that we are really, when I talk about United States, we're very behind the curve here when it comes to sustainability in comparison to places like Europe, Japan, etc. But consumers are looking for eco-friendly packaging, and the industry is moving towards more sustainable packaging solutions, whether it be recyclable, compostable, or both. The use of recyclable materials, biodegradable packaging, and essentially just reducing overall plastic usage. So we're feeling that a lot within the beverage industry. And then, of course, there's a big emphasis in sustainable sourcing. Companies are prioritizing sustainable sourcing of ingredients, ensuring ethical practices, and reducing environmental impacts throughout the supply chain. And that's difficult to do because when we're talking about supply chain, we're not just talking about your tier one suppliers, but we have tier two, tier three, tier four, and for those that may be unfamiliar with that term, so tier one supplier is suppliers that we do business with directly, right? So those are the folks that we have set up in our system as suppliers. When we cut purchase orders, those POs will go to them. But those tier one suppliers may not necessarily be the ones that are actually producing the goods that we're buying. They may be just a distributor, for example. So they got to source from their supplier, which would be our tier two, and it might even go as deep as tier three, tier four, etc. So the supply chain is very integral within itself, and suppliers and customers. In a lot of cases, a supplier can be a customer, and a customer could be a supplier at the same time.
Right. So I like the point. So this just kind of as we are full spectrum frontiers, right? Mm-hmm. The whole excuse me. You bring up like the eco-friendly. This is just a little nugget, like an eco-friendly packaging, right? Now, what that does in the grand scheme of things too, though, is it changes because most plastics now, well, all plastics are petroleum-derived products, right? Usually, I would say petroleum-derived products. And if you're switching over to a more eco-friendly that's maybe sourced from a different natural resource, the demand for said resource shifts, right? Mm-hmm. Which affects global supply chains, the amount of oil that because say Coke and your competitors, if you kind of all going, because you were saying that the market is demanding certain things, right? And you guys are in the business of giving the market what they want, correct? So I would assume that your competitors are doing the same thing. I can't imagine the difference in raw resource then it would totally affect availability and or the demand for certain other products, right? And the long-reaching effects that has throughout the months and years after. It's kind of what you alluded to, is that certain things that were affected back in 2020 are just hitting now. That's kind of it just alludes to the actual full spectrum problems that we're talking about, not just on this podcast, but as a country, right? That it's bigger than just, I can't get bottles, or I can't get labels.
Right. And I think a lot of it too, like, hold on, my computer just froze. Audacity did. Okay, I think we're good. So the other thing too is, the supply chain is very, very similar to, think of a bell curve, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you have an industry, and one player within the industry wants to be a first mover in sustainable packaging, right? So let's say we want to get out of plastic and we want to move to a more sustainable resource for that package. So we reach out to, in many cases, it's not even going to be the same supplier, maybe a different supplier that is offering that sustainable package. And now we want to move forward with that, right? But because we're the first mover, there's not a lot of demand, which means that I'm going to pay a premium, right, to move that way. So there's going to be an added cost to my company to be the first mover in that space, which means I'm going to have to ultimately pass that cost on to the consumer. So I'm on the front side of that bell curve.
Yeah.
And then let's say other folks within the industry, they start to move, and then all of a sudden now we're at the top of the bell curve and prices start to come down because there's more demand for it, right? But let's say you're that company that's the last mover, because you're still in that plastic. Let's say you're still in that plastic package. You're on the far side of that bell curve. Everyone else has moved, and you're the last mover. And all of a sudden, you can't get the raw materials, or you can't get that plastic packaging, and now you're forced to make that capital investment in order to, because a lot of times it's not just about moving packaging. You've got to reinvest into new equipment, different kinds
the
of
bottling,
equipment, right?
all of it, right?
Yeah, and so that's the thing is you can't always be the first mover because it's just too cost prohibitive, but you definitely can't be the last mover because then you're stuck. right? So that's this fine balance of knowing when to move. And at the end of the day, the consumer drives demand, right? But at the same time, consumers don't always want to pay for what they want, right? They want sustainable packaging. What they don't realize is sometimes that means it's going to cost more to have that consumable, that beverage, that
Well, it's
food
like
product,
the
whatever it is.
idea of made in America, right? Or like
Yeah.
made in the USA, like
Yeah.
we.
Right. Yeah.
So you get that T-shirt from, say, like H&M, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was made in Bangladesh, that you can pay $15 for. The same T-shirt made in America is $40.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
same thing.
Yeah. People want what they want, but they don't want to pay for what they
Right,
want.
right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And that's the
Because
thing is
because nothing's free. Everything is passed on to the customer.
right.
Period.
Yep. And making products more sustainable using new technologies, purchasing equipment that actually supports that. It costs money, and we've got to pass. You can't expect the company that's making these things to eat all of the costs, because then at the end of the day, the organizations will go out of business, and you won't have any product, right? So we've got to pass that cost on to the consumer, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just the way, you know,
That's
the
business.
economics work.
Businesses
That's
can't
business.
eat. You just can't eat it. This is like the one of those misconceptions. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but you'll
Mm-hmm.
agree with me. Is the one of the misconceptions is that companies are this they have all this money because we've been told that they have all this money and they're not paying taxes and all this stuff, right? But that's just not the truth.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, profit margins are pretty slim on most things, and when they are doing capital improvement, they're paying for that, or the customer's paying for that. It's just the way
Exactly.
it works.
Yep.
So segueing into that though, you brought up technology,
Yeah.
um, smart manufacturing, things like that. How have you guys, like, what have you done in the, like, say, the past 4 years that has like made things maybe, and I'm not talking about just like improved efficiency, but maybe safety for your employees, quality control stuff, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking specifically my company, but what I'm seeing industry wide, and I've talked with a lot of different. Like I said, I interface with a lot of suppliers, so I also learn what they're doing, what things are they doing in the way of technology and sustainability. I get to tour their facilities and see what's going on. It's very interesting. So the integration of advanced technologies into supply chain management is completely transforming how companies operate. It enhances efficiency, visibility, and responsiveness. And some things that are most significant technological advances currently impacting supply chain are things like the Internet of Things, or IoT. You've probably heard it as. So that's real-time tracking. IoT devices enable real-time tracking of goods throughout the supply chain, providing visibility into location, condition, and movement. And this helps in reducing delays, optimizing routes, and ensures product quality. So that just goes all the way back to not just, I know some folks that put like RFID chips on pallets to be able to track their movement in and out of the facility, all the way to installing GPS devices within their fleet, their tractors and trailers, so they know, where they are on the route, time to delivery, those types of things. And then you have artificial intelligence, or AI, and machine learning. So that increases demand forecasting. AI and ML algorithms analyze historical data and market trends to improve demand forecasting accuracy, and it leads to better inventory management and reduces stockouts or overstock situations. It also allows for process optimization. So AI-driven analytics optimizes various supply chain processes, from procurement to production to delivery, and enhancing overall efficiency and reducing cost. There's things, I won't get into specifics here, but you've got blockchain, you've got robotics and automation,
Oh
you've got
yeah, for sure.
advanced analytical and big data, you've got cloud computing, 5G connectivity, augmented reality, or AR, and virtual reality, VR, And then you've got drones and autonomous vehicles. You've heard about the advancements of, that the Amazon's making with, dropping packages with drones. And
Yeah,
you've got,
possibly,
right?
right? That's just crazy. I think there's a company here in central New York that's actually, it's a veteran-owned company, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
but they're doing, like, there is a actual test group of patients. It's a pharmacy company, right?
Okay.
And it's delivering medication within like a certain distance, and I want to say it's like 2 miles or something
Mm-hmm.
from this place that had the warehouse. And I'm anxious to see how that goes.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
crazy.
And the other thing that's really kind of took off lately is 3D printing. I mean, back in the day, 3D printing was such a, you know, an expensive endeavor, and anybody that did it was paying an arm and a leg. But like most things with technology over time, it becomes, cheaper, more cost effective, and that allows other people to enter into that space. And it's much easier sometimes to 3D print products than it is to have molds developed. And because let's say you have a mold created and you're pressing extrusion or whatever it is to create it, and all of a sudden the consumer is wanting something different. Now you've got to scrap all your old molds and you got to have new molds created,
Which
whereas
cost thousands of dollars.
thousands of dollars.
I mean, I can't remember. We were looking at having something made, like extrusion done.
Yeah.
And the company, just to make the mold to do the injection molding,
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what it would be called, right? Injection molding.
Yep.
Just to do the injection molding was, and this is for small stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like big stuff. And it was almost $20,000 to have the mold machined.
Oh, sure.
So
Yep. So 3D printing is just an amazing technology. It allows for on-demand production of components and products, reducing the need for large inventories, enabling more responsive supply chains. It also is more flexible and allows for customization, facilitates the production and customized products, meeting specific customers' needs without extensive retooling or manufacturing processes. And it also is crucial for new product introduction. So if you got something, maybe your engineers, your R&D team wants to try something new, instead of spending all that kind of money on the NRE, the non-recurring engineering components of new product introduction, perhaps you can just do some 3D printing to get proof of concept,
a
those types of things.
little beta testing.
Exactly, very cost effective for organizations.
That's yeah, yes, Battlesite did that, especially with the applicator stuff for the
Mm-hmm.
Craytech. It's an invaluable, and I think now technically our applicators are still 3D printed.
Nice.
Instead of, and that just shows, I mean, they can 3D print food now,
Yeah, it's a game changer.
right? I
Absolutely.
mean, like it's almost to the what was Star Trek, where you get
Yeah.
the replicator or whatever
Yeah.
they have, and you're at the canteen on the starship.
Mm-hmm.
And you like order a hamburger and whoop, there it
Whoop,
is.
there it is.
Well,
Well,
how do you
they
think that was made? That was 3D printed, probably, or
yeah.
whatever. I'm just saying, what I
Yep.
mean.
Yep.
But talking about the future, that's just
The
madness.
future is here.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure, right? Um. So what? So how much has the manufacturing, so like you were just talking about 3D printing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the AI, because this is a big part of, especially not just the civilian side but the military side, is the AI machine learning.
Sure.
Everyone's afraid that it's going to take away jobs, right? Which I'm sure it's gonna in certain aspects, but have you guys had any experience with that, where it's like, or has it just been more of an enhancement more than a taking away per se.
Yeah, I think, I mean, AI and machine learning is definitely out there, right? And I wouldn't
It's not
say
going away.
no, it definitely isn't. And to address the whole, it's going to take my job away, but what it does do though is it may make some jobs and operations obsolete, but what it does do is it creates opportunity for upskilling your employee base, right? So a lot of people when they hear about technology eliminating positions, what the other side of that coin, that messaging needs to be, yes, but that's going to create opportunities for a different position that requires advanced learning and advanced skill set. And a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to get rid of all of my individual contributors that are and hire people that have this knowledge. Well, I mean, that is an approach, but a savvy organization is going to look for ways to retain their people and say, hey, yeah, your position may be becoming eliminated, but here's an opportunity, and I'll pay to have you go get some education,
Or we'll provide training.
or we'll provide internal training, whatever the case may be. And you're not losing a job, you're gaining a different job, and perhaps maybe it's at a higher salary too, right? So artificial intelligence, or AI, and machine learning, ML, are revolutionizing logistics and procurement by enhancing efficiency, accuracy, and decision-making capabilities. That's the big part, right? You have to use it to leverage decision-making capabilities. So you do that in several ways. One, demand forecasting and inventory management. So predictive analytics, for example, right? Algorithms
Right.
analyzes historical sales data, market trends, external factors, and predicts future demand more accurately. This is, contrary to today's way of doing it, of just licking your fingers, sticking it in the air, and see what direction the wind is blowing, right?
Right.
This helps in optimizing inventory levels, reducing stockouts, and minimizing your excess inventory, which is huge, because you sit on too much inventory, inevitably you're going to end up eating that scrap cost because you're not going to need it anymore.
Right.
It's either
Because
out of
it's
code
especially with perishable things.
oh, absolutely, yeah, for sure. Or you're maybe it's not a perishable, maybe it's a package, like maybe it's a label or some type of paperboard packaging, but your customer demand changes, and now it wants something different than what you were producing before. So now you got all this inventory that you don't need anymore. What do you do with it, right? You've got to scrap it. Dynamic inventory management. So machine learning models continuously adjust inventory policies and based on real-time data, ensuring optimal stock levels and reducing holding costs. Because at the end of the day, inventory that you buy to run your business, if it's sitting on a shelf, it still costs you money, right? It's an asset that you're essentially paying for. The other thing is supplier management and risk mitigation. So that's really broken up into two categories. That's supplier performance monitoring and risk prediction. So in the performance monitoring, AI tools evaluate supplier performance by analyzing data from multiple sources. So that's a tool we're actually looking at right now is, we put our suppliers into these, third-party solutions, and it looks at everything from their financials through their Duns and Bradstreet information. It looks at OSHA things that may be violated or something like that. So it has the capability of looking deeper into your suppliers that you do business with to see how healthy they are, how sustainable they've become. How much of a risk do they pose to your organization? And that brings us to the second one I mentioned was risk prediction. So AI models assesses geopolitical, environmental, and market risks by analyzing vast amounts of data.
Yeah,
much,
that just
much
changes
faster.
the game.
Much faster than we can do today, right? It allows companies to proactively manage potential disruptions and develop contingency plans. Now, here's the thing, right? Here's the kicker. You can have this technology. It could provide you with some insights, but if you make no actions based off of those insights, then the technology really isn't doing what it's doing its job. But the thing about it is you've got to take action. You've got to follow up with what it's telling you, right? If it's saying, hey, there's something coming down the pike that you might want to, develop a contingency plan for, and you don't do that, and that happens. You know what I mean? You can't blame the technology, right?
No, you have to blame the
Right.
decision maker, right?
You
So
have to you have to have a synchronous marriage between your technology and your actions. You can't have one without the other.
yeah. So with that being said, I it kind of again segues into the next question is like how do companies because it's not even as we've learned it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Something else is going to happen. I mean, you hear about on the news every day the next pandemic or the
Mm-hmm.
next, even now, with weather, like hurricane season, right?
Mm-hmm.
This hurricane season is probably going to be way worse than last, right? So, and that can affect all kinds of things, right? So, how do companies like yours, and I mean, just big companies in general, how can you better prepare to mitigate those disruptions? In whether it's supplies, all those things.
Yeah. I would have to say to better prepare and mitigate supply chain disruptions, companies need to adopt a proactive and strategic approach, right? You can't just sit on the train tracks and complain when you get run over, right?
Yeah.
You've got to get off and you've got
Right.
you've got to do
Step out of the
things.
way at least, man.
Right. Yeah. So you can do this in several ways. Diversification of suppliers and sources. We call this continuity of supply. So you want to spread the risk, right? If you've got a raw material that you're buying and you only have one supplier in, let's say, down in Baton Rouge, and they're a great supplier, but they're the only one you buy this from. And it's critical to your business. You need it to produce, period. And all of a sudden, a hurricane comes through and wipes out that manufacturing facility in Baton Rouge. Guess what? It's not your supplier's fault. He couldn't,
Right.
they couldn't do
You're
anything
SOL.
about it. But now I'm scrambling. Now I don't have another source of supply, right? So you want to spread the risk. Relying on a single supplier or geographic region increases vulnerability. By diversifying suppliers and sourcing from multiple regions, companies can reduce the risk of disruption due to localized events. And it doesn't matter where you are in the country. Every part of the country there's some risk, right? In the back west, there's water shortage. You've got heat index that are crazy. In the Northeast, you got snow and power outages. Down in the South, you got hurricanes, and in the Midwest, you've got tornadoes. I mean, it doesn't really matter where your suppliers are. There's going to be a component of risk, and you just have to find ways to spread that around and mitigate it as much as you can.
I mean, one of the prime examples that and this is just a visual for the audience to, if you ever just look up, like the different ports, like the port of Long Beach out in
Mm-hmm.
California, during the past pandemic that we had, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of cargo ships anchored offshore because they couldn't offload their products.
Right.
And that is one of those things. It's this concept of just bringing your suppliers back home,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And either through finding somebody here that can do it instead of in China or India or wherever. It's what there's a name for that, nearshoring, right?
Nearshoring, yeah. Yeah, bringing suppliers closer to home can reduce lead times and transportation risks. And nearshoring also allows for better oversight and quicker response times, for sure.
And just downright better adaptability, frankly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, some other things that you can look at doing is enhanced visibility and transparency. Things like real-time tracking, implementing advanced tracking systems into your vehicles or your whatever it is that you're moving or producing or transporting. Also, you can envelop some type of supply chain mapping, a detailed map of the supply chain, including second and third tier suppliers that we mentioned before. It helps identify potential bottlenecks and vulnerabilities, and you can reach out to your suppliers and say, "Hey, what is your greatest?" If you've truly developed a supplier relationship they should be open with you about that, right? What are your risks in your supply chain? So you don't just want to understand what your risks are for your tier one, but what are your tier one's risks? Are they sourcing it from? Do they only have one company that they're sourcing from, or is the company that they're sourcing from in a geographical area that's susceptible to higher risk, as an example? Also, investing in technology, predictive analytics, blockchain technologies, those types of things can help you be more resilient. There's also agile and flexible supply chain design. So modular supply chains. So modular supply chains is designing modular supply chains that can be easily reconfigured in response to disruptions, ensuring continued operation under various scenarios. So think of the military, right? Before the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm dating myself here, but we're talking, back 20 years ago, our military was structured essentially to fight big army, to fight like a Russia or some large organization. And then once we started to deploy to smaller regions like Iraq and Afghanistan and other parts of the country, we realized that our military needed to be more modular, a little bit smaller and more agile. So they started to take
like
those
the brigade combat team aspect.
Yes, exactly. So instead of, before you had to have at least a division deployed in order to have all of the different, functions within a military to be sustainable. They realized that's just too big. We need to be much smaller. So we need to provide all those same assets, but in a smaller scale, which created essentially your brigade combat team. So now, within that smaller element, you've got all the pieces and components that you need to function, but you can do it in a much smaller footprint and a much faster timeline. Look at your supply chain, and you need to find ways to do that as well, to make your supply chain more modular, more nimble. You can cut things out, replace things without impacting your entire supply chain from top to bottom, right? And then flexible manufacturing, investing in flexible manufacturing systems that can quickly switch production lines to different products and helps mitigate the impact of disruptions. And then a few more here. I won't get into details, but you can, things like inventory management. So we've talked about JIT, just in time, but there's also this concept of just in case inventory, right? There's certain things that you may need to invest in.
Yeah, that's a term I've heard a bunch lately.
Yeah,
right?
It's a term that's coming to life quite often nowadays. Is there's things you absolutely need to run your business, but there's things you also need just in case.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
which is a fine line of balance there, right? Because
Sure.
we were talking about earlier is hanging on. Oh, it's like it's one thing to hoard toilet paper, right?
right.
Because you're never gonna not need toilet paper,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But it's another thing to hoard red meat.
Yeah,
because red meat's gonna go bad.
I'll give you an example of one of our just-in-case inventories is our drivers. When our drivers deliver to our customers, they have these handheld printers. It essentially prints out the receipt, basically, right? So it's it's these, we call it driver printer paper. They come on these small rolls, and during the pandemic, all of a sudden, it became, pretty much very difficult, if not impossible, to get a new stock of that paper from our supplier. And we had enough, thank God, to kind of get us through, but we got right down to it, right? You got pretty nerve-wracking there. So that let us know that, oh boy, maybe we should have a just-in-case inventory of that paper. That way, if something like that were to happen, because it's a single-sourced item, it's a custom paper that we've
it's not like there's 14 companies making printer paper, right?
Yeah.
For these handheld things.
Exactly. I mean, there is an off-the-shelf solution, but it didn't work very good, so we actually had this paper custom made.
Yeah.
And, we did it for a lot of different reasons, but yeah, it's a custom-made thing. Now all of a sudden, we're susceptible to that. So we've worked with our supplier. We've got an agreement in place where they're housing more of that inventory for us as a just-in-case type of situation. So that's just an example of how something so small, so little, seemingly insignificant can have a big impact to your operations, right? And then I already mentioned this before, but you need to have strong relationship with your suppliers. That involves collaboration, supplier development, Because without that, if you're just saying, I'm the customer, you're the supplier, I've got the leverage, you don't, you can go at it that way, sure. But when push comes to shove and you need them, you need to pick up the phone and call in a favor with
Oh
one of your
yeah,
suppliers.
because what do
Happens
we
all the time,
all the time? What do we
right?
say that people do business with people that they like, know, and trust?
That's right.
And if people
Absolutely.
don't like, know, and trust you, um, they don't give a crap how much. And a lot of times they don't even give a crap how much money you're giving them. You know what I
Exactly
mean?
right.
So it's just not good business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So along with that too, though, so you talk about relationships, and I'm switching to the human aspect of that. Like, you've known me a long time. I have this problem with the term human resource, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
as you know, it's something that I kind of loathe. That we've switched from personnel to human resource, and we talk about human capital, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
human whatever. And it's fine. I understand, like, in a detached kind of robotic way. Sometimes in the greater system, you have to look at all the parts of the system, and humans happen to be part of that, right?
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
but we're human. We're not a resource necessarily. We're not capital per se, and it could just be semantics in my brain and whatnot. But I try to give it more leverage than humans just being a resource, right? So, with that being said, though, um, how important is the human capital investment in that in business?
It-
With whether it's training or I mean wellness. So this kind of goes
mm-hmm.
hand in hand with the pandemic, right? The wellness side of all of this, I think, is something that we don't talk about a lot.
We don't. And the truth of it is, and some people are very blind to this, is the fact that nowadays in today's world and landscape, people, graduating high school, going to their local manufacturing center or whatever that their parents worked at or whatever their uncle worked at, and then, spending the next 40 years and retiring out of that company, like those days by and large are gone, right? You have
Right? Doesn't
people.
exist.
It doesn't. I mean, I there's every company has those long tenured associates that did that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that was 30, 40 years ago. That was just kind of the way things were done back then.
That was our parents, really.
Exactly. And we have long tenured folks at our company that are retiring with 40, 45 years of service, and that is incredibly admirable. But 40 years from now, I don't know that you're going to have very many people that have spent that amount of time with any single organization. I don't think it's just going to happen. So what does that mean? That means that people that are entering the workforce now, they're not planning on dying in your organization. Or I say that
Right, right.
figuratively,
No,
but
no, right.
you know what I mean. They're,
Absolutely.
they're
Yeah.
not they're not planning on doing 30 plus years and retiring out of your company. They're probably going to do 5 to 10 years the most, and they're going to move on to their next career opportunity. And that
Which is
is
kind of
more,
a why. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's something, and this is just a seed that's being
yeah.
planted. Is why is it? And I'm not. This is not a direct question to you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's kind of to the audience. Is why is it like that? And are there obviously there's probably advantages and disadvantages to that, but it's one of those things. It's really company culture, I guess, is
It is.
what it comes down to.
I think I can answer some of that why. I think some of that why is because some organizations just don't offer upskilling opportunities. You get somebody that comes into an organization and they spend 5 years and they get really good and they're a high potential, but they want more. And sometimes that company doesn't have an avenue to provide them with more, whether that be more training, more education, more experience, more whatever it is that they're looking for, more development. They just don't have that path for more, and so the associate's going to go and find that more somewhere else, right?
Right.
Whether it be within
Upward
another
upward
industry.
mobility
And it's
basically.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
But it's
in
not
some
all
cases,
that. You're
it's
right.
not always about, some people are just, let's get up the ladder as fast as we can. I want to be a vice president before I'm 25. All right. That's some mentality that some people have. Unfortunately, that's.
Probably been glorified more than it should
Yeah.
have because it's not. Yeah. Eh,
Yeah.
As we both know from experience, that's not always the best way to look at life
Right.
or even a career.
But a lot of things, at the end of the day, I mean, money is important, but what we're finding culturally, it's not everything, right? Some people are leaving the organization because the other company is offering more flexibility because time is also valuable, whether it be hybrid model, working from home, less travel, maybe it's more travel. There are other things that people value than just upward mobility and or money.
Which
Those
is
are
another
important.
which is another chink in the armor of things that I think the pandemic really
Absolutely.
showed, and that is again in the full spectrum idea of the world. It's a ripple. It's another ripple effect, right?
It is. Somebody realized after the spending 2 years at home that, wait a minute, I can work from home. I can get my work done, and I don't have to spend money on that daycare. I can actually essentially raise my child, and I can let my dog out, every 2 hours instead of coming home to a mess.
Right. And I'm
Right.
probably more effective.
Right.
Not always, not every. Some people need that desk, right?
Some
Some
people
people
do.
need that with the discipline, but also not just people. Companies realize that I don't need a 45,000 square foot, which is not even that big, but a 45,000 square foot office
Mm-hmm.
uh, when I can literally have a 5,000 square foot office and think of the overhead and expense savings just in
Sure.
that, right? Because my people can work from home.
And I've seen companies that embrace that. Let's work from home and let's get rid of our overhead of additional office space and really kind of embrace that either the hybrid model or that remote model and are doing very well with it. I've seen other organizations that say, you know what, absolutely not. I need my people to be in the office to fill these seats every single day without fail. And I think some of that has to do with management
It's leadership.
capability. Well, I think it's because if you have a workforce that's transitioned from working in the office to working at home as a manager, you have to change or shift your management expectations. You no longer are managing somebody's time. You have to manage their work output, right? And for some managers, that's a huge shift they just cannot seem to overcome because some managers just get used to saying, you know what, you're in the office 9 to 5. I'm going to make sure, right?
What do we call those guys usually? Some micromanagers, right?
Well, I mean, at
Well,
the end of the
not
day,
always,
that's
but yeah.
yeah. I mean, it could be, but that's the only way they've known to manage. Now, it doesn't mean that their people are productive in that 8 hour time sitting at their desk. That just means that they're in the
Oh
office.
no,
So if they're it's like this: if they're in the office, they must be working. If they're working, then I'm getting my money's worth
it's
out
the
of them,
office
right?
space paradigm, right?
Yeah, yeah. But if they're not in their office, they're at home, then they're automatically not working. I'm not getting my money's worth out of them, right? So, in order for that to be successful, you have to have a paradigm shift in expectations in that you can't manage time, you have to manage work output and productivity. You have to say, I don't care when you work, I care about getting this done, right?
Yes, the
And
output,
the output and the productivity, right? You're managing work versus time. And that's a big shift. A lot of managers just cannot wrap their heads around. And as a result, they have to have their people come in and they just have to stick to managing the time.
right, which is not really management. I mean, it is, but it's not that productive. I would say it's not as productive.
But, I mean, if you've got these long tenured folks that have been in a company for 30, 40 years and that's all they've done, that's all they know, it's good enough for them.
Yeah,
That's all that
true.
matters.
It's
Right?
like you just show up, take your sick time when you're sick, and
Yeah.
take your vacation. In the summer, and it's one of those things. Like that's just
Yeah, I'm not saying
evolution.
it's yeah.
But it's
I'm
the
not,
evolution of,
I'm
of
not
all
saying
this
it's
stuff.
right or it's wrong. I'm just saying that's just the way it is. And if you're a manager listening to this and you're struggling with your folks working remotely, it's probably because you're used to managing time versus output, right?
Output, correct. Yeah,
If you're a
which
manager,
in
if
the
you,
end of the day,
that
my
should be what
opinion,
matters
it
anyway,
should be
right?
the input or
It
the
should,
output, not the
yeah,
input, but the
yeah.
output is what really it was where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah,
So
but in order to manage output versus time, then you've got to have more communication with your directs. You have to know what they're working on. You have to make sure that their priorities are very clear, and you've got to be very, very, very specific about deliverables and deliveries and due dates, right? And sometimes that's a lot as a manager to manage. If all you used to do is manage time, making sure you're in at 8 and making sure you're taking an hour lunch and make sure you work till 5, it's easy. It's just a matter of looking at a clock and making sure somebody's
at their desk.
at their desk. Right. That's one way of management. But the other way of management does require a little bit more hands on in terms of getting to know your people, understanding what they're working on, making sure that they know when things are due. Those types of things. It's a little bit of a shift in management. But at the end of the day, I mean, even if you're a manager managing time, you should be thinking about those deliverables too anyway. But a lot of times we don't really see that. We just see people managing time, making sure that they're in their seats. But, that's also the thing, right? Whenever company's not doing well, the knee-jerk reaction is to do what? Headcount reduction, right?
Well, it's
And
because there's immediate feedback.
it's very immediate. But it also, what it does do is it forces those managers that are just managing time to now you go from, let's say you go from 10 people to now to 8 people. There's 2 people's worth of work that are now gone because you had to let them go.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Now,
They become a workplace sponge.
yeah, it becomes now you've got to shift that work. Now you got to be a little bit more diligent about the employees that you have remaining and what work they're doing. And at the end of the day, headcount reduction isn't necessarily a bad thing. It forces the managers to get really clear on what work is being done and making sure that, because at the end of the day, we're all familiar with Parkinson's law, right? Parkinson's law says that I will consume whatever amount of time given to me for a particular task. So if Bennett, you're my boss, and you give me a task and you give me a week to do that task, guess how long it's going to take me to do that task? It's going to take me a week, right? Parkinson's law says I'm going to consume that full time. Well, if now you condense that and you say, hey, Eddie, I need you to get this same task done, but I need it done in 4 days, it'll still take me 4 days because of Parkinson's law, but I didn't use the full week, right? So it forces managers to condense the expectations or maybe their deadlines, and really put more focus on their team. Also understand, if I got 40 hours worth of work that I need to do a week and I get the certain things that I know you're looking for done, I need to fill my time somewhere else. So how do I fill my time? Oh, I fill my time with creating this report that's necessarily not needed, that nobody looks at, and I do this that nobody needs, and I do that nobody needs, but I'm filling that time, right? I'm filling that gap. So by condensing that, it allows you to look at what work your people are doing and say, yep, you can stop doing that, or you can change doing that. And that, sometimes it's hard because the employees be like, well, I've run this report, every week since I've been here, and I've, been here for 5 years. Okay, that's great, but who are you sending that report to? What decisions are being made based off of that report? And when you dig into it, you find out that the report's going out and nobody's taking action. And nobody's taken action on that report for 5 years. Is it really needed?
Right. Is it really needed?
Right? And I bring that up because it was kind of something that happened to me, and it was not at the job I'm at now. It was a previous employer. I was brought in and I was, given this work to do. And one of the things I had to do every week was run this report. And it took like 3 hours to run, pull all this data together, condense it down. And my manager wanted me to send it out to this, distribution of people. And so I did that. And I did that for probably 6 months. And then I was just like, whenever I sent it out to a pretty large distribution list, like 60 people, right? And every week, without fail, not a single person came back with any questions, anything.
They're like, why is this guy even sending this out?
Yeah. So I went to my manager and I'm like, hey, boss, I know I'm new here and, wet behind the ears, but I've been compiling this report and sending it out every week, and I've gotten 0 responses. And I took one step further, and I reached out to a handful of them, and I asked them if they use the report, if they look at the report, what decisions are they making based off of the data. And the response that I got back was they don't even look at the report. And I asked my boss, I was like, it takes about 3 hours a week to run. I'm wondering if we really even need this report anymore. And he says, that's interesting. He goes, well, I'll tell you what. Instead of running it once a week, let's run it every other week, and let's see if anybody comes back with anything. I said, sure, that sounds like a good idea. So we did that for a couple of months, every other week. Nothing, crickets. I went back and said, no, boss, nothing. He goes, all right, well, how about we run it once a month, and let's see if anybody says anything. All right, so I did that for a couple of months. Nothing. I went back to my boss. I said, nope, still nothing. He goes, all right, stop running it, and let's see if anybody squawks. So I stopped running the report, stopped sending it out, and not a single person reached out to me or my boss asking about why the report's not going out anymore. So we had to do it in stages. It wasn't just cut it off at the knees. We did it incrementally, but it made my boss think about what other things is my team doing that's no longer needed. Because at the end of that report, once upon a time, was very critical to the business operation, right? Everybody needed it and was very specific. It had to do with the project that was being worked on at the time. But over time, something that is business need or a requirement no longer becomes relevant. And as your business changes, and as those things that used to be relevant become no longer relevant, you should also mirror that workload with your people. And you got to let somebody know, hey, I know you've been running this report since you started here 10 years ago, and it's become, a time sink every single week, and you do a great job doing it, but we no longer need to do that anymore. You may have to, this case was different because I went to my manager with it and said, I think we can stop doing this. So I saved 3 hours of a week of my time back, right? But as a manager, you may have to go to your people to say, hey, I know you've been doing this forever, but I don't need you to do it anymore. To that employee, it may seem like, oh my God.
At that point, just your example, that's almost 1% of your total hours worked in a week.
True. Yeah.
Was spent on a completely useless report. That
right.
In theory, who knows? I mean, I don't know if you guys could look back now, but I wonder what the duplication of data was on that too.
Sure.
Who else was running a similar report? You know what I mean? Or where the data was covered, and that's an efficiency aspect. Yeah, and this is why companies employ people to actually literally manage the efficiency of how we run as a company, right?
And maybe you have too many people because the work that you're having them do is no longer relevant. So I think the whole moral of this story is occasionally you have to do a workload inventory. What is it that your people are doing? How long is it taking them to do it? And what value is it bringing to the organization? And if it's bringing little or no value, you need to cut those things and free up that capacity to do other things that are coming. At the end of the day, this whole podcast has been about change and how the landscape of supply chain and logistics has changed throughout all industry. And as our businesses change, as our consumers ask for new things, as sustainability becomes more prevalent, things are within our organizations have to change, and we've got to be agile to change with them. Because if we just pound that stake in the ground and say, nope, this is my ground, I'm not moving off of it, I was here first, and I'm not going to change the way I do business, guess what? Your competitors will, and you're going to lose that competitive advantage. You're going to lose your consumer base, and you're going to be out of a job. That's just the way it is. You've got to be flexible. You got to be agile. You got to move with the demand.
And that has to do with all aspects of this.
True.
Supply chain, procurement, education, workforce regulation, all these things that we've talked about today. I think that's probably a good spot to end for the day.
Yeah, I will say there's one more thing I wanted to kind of to mention here, and that is, one of the things that we have to look at, right, is how e-commerce is changing the landscape of our businesses, how e-commerce is changing the landscape of us as consumers. I'll give you a couple of examples. So The other day, I went into a Chipotle to order some food, and I got to the checkout, and I wanted to buy a bag of their chips. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
the
Their corn
homemade
chips,
chips,
the
right?
homemade chips, right? And I can look on the back on the shelf behind the person at the register. There's probably 160 bags already pre-made, just sitting there, right? And I was like, "Yeah, can I get a bag of chips?" And he goes, "Our fryer is broken, so we're not selling chips." And I'm like, "But you got like I can see you have like 160 pre-made bags." He goes, "Those are for online orders only."
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I was like,
Wow.
so if I step out of line and I get on my phone and I place an online order for a bag of chips, will you sell them to me? And he goes, yes. And I'm like, okay. So that tells me a couple things. One, that they are valuing the online or e-commerce customer more than the customer that actually is standing in front of them looking in their face, right? Another example of that is how many times have you gone to a grocery store and you're at the checkout and there's probably 50 checkout lanes but only two are open and there's like 50 people in each of the lanes waiting to get checked out. It's not that the grocery store doesn't have enough employees. They do, but all of the other employees are walking up and down the aisles filling online orders, and it only leaves a couple people at the checkout. So go to the next time you're at a grocery store, or next time you're at Walmart or any of these stores, start noticing how many employees are walking up and down the aisles filling online
Yeah,
orders,
doing the actual shopping.
right? And how many people are actually there to service the in-store customer. I'm telling you right now, e-commerce has a higher priority over you being in the store. So what does that mean
Well,
as
they
a
can charge a
business?
higher rate for it too.
Absolutely, but it just goes to show you that that companies are valuing e-commerce way more than you as a in-store shopper, in-store consumer. So think about that. If you are a business and you are looking for foot traffic to make your bottom line, you need to start thinking about ways to maybe making those opportunities for your consumers to buy things online much easier, because that's essentially where your consumer base is going to be if you let it. Otherwise, if you don't, you're going to be out of business.
Yeah, I think we can also apply that thinking to all, uh, even manufacturing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that it's not just about what's right in front of you. It's about, yeah, that's huge. That's
Mm-hmm.
food for thought. Those are seeds planted right there.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well,
All right.
it's good to talk to you, and we will probably do this again, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Sounds good. I had a great time. I love talking this stuff. Some people are going to listen to this and be like, oh, not my cup of tea. Other people are going to eat this up. This is
For
like,
sure.
I live and breathe
Absolutely.
this stuff. So I'm glad. I'm glad what you're doing on the show. Look forward to future episodes, listening to what else you've got going on and different people to interview. So thanks, Bennett, for the opportunity to come on and talk about supply chain.
Absolutely. All right.
And that wraps up another episode of Full Spectrum Frontiers. We hope you enjoyed our dive into the intersection of military innovations and civilian applications with our special guest, Eddie Lazzari. Eddie's insights and experiences provided us with a unique perspective on how these fields converge and influence each other. We'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Eddie for joining us today and sharing his valuable knowledge. If you found today's discussion intriguing, make sure to check out Eddie's own projects and follow his journey. As always, thank you for tuning in and supporting Full Spectrum Frontiers. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you thought-provoking content. Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website for updates on upcoming episodes. Until next time, I'm Bennett Tanton, reminding you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Take care and see you in the next episode.
It's just you, me, and the odds. We stuck together, we two peas in a pod. You dealt a bad hand, I'm there seizing the cards. We'll never be separated till we seeing the gods. We've been low together, high forever. Long as we go together, we'll die whenever. Be a light, couldn't let the darkness try you ever. Truth in my word, you I lie to never. And when the world gets a little too hard, wipe your eyes, put away your sorrow. When it's war, I'll be leading the charge, and I'll be still fighting for you tomorrow. Yeah, even with a blindfold or in different time zones, could find my way to you with my eyes closed. There's nothing between us. Go to Mars and Venus, stand in front of every one of them rocks, they slimming and be a shield.
Your shield, yeah. In the fiercest battle, I'll defend you. From all these arrows and the sword I wield will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield.
Yeah, let's go. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your
You may be facing tribulation, but don't let it get you down. What I'm saying may take patience, but you're gonna make it.